The night fell on a hill that looked down upon the small white houses of a seaside village. In their grove, olive trees gathered like a circle of old friends. Their trunks were silver and gnarled, ribboned by time, their leaves, green on one side and pale on the other, shivered even when the air stood still, as if they were speaking among themselves. The villagers said the grove was sacred to Athena, the gray-eyed goddess of wisdom. They lit small oil lamps there at dusk and spoke softly as they walked, for the place had the feeling of a library, where each leaf was a page and the wind read it aloud. In a house with blue shutters, a child named Thalia lived with her father, a fisherman. She had eyes like sea glass, a little green and a little gray, and a quiet way of listening to things that others did not hear. The click of shells when the tide turned, the secret knock of the cicadas under the bark. Thalia's mother had sailed away to care for her own ailing mother on a far island and would return, everyone said, when the almond trees bloomed again. Almond blossoms were months away. Loneliness, like a folded shawl, lay over Thalia's shoulders wherever she went. In the evenings, when her father mended nets by the door, Thalia climbed the hill to Athena's grove. There she could be lonely without feeling alone. She would sit with her back against the particular olive tree whose trunk had a hollow shaped like an ear. She called it the ear tree. When she pressed her palms to the bark, she felt a slow and steady heartbeat she knew was not her own. "Good evening," she would whisper, because in sacred places it felt right to be polite. And sometimes, only sometimes, she would think she heard an answer, not with her ears, but with the part of her that knew how to listen. A long breath that moved through every leaf, as if the whole grove sighed, "Ah, there you are." One evening, the moon was a thin silver boat, and the first star hung in the west like a fish caught on an invisible line. Thalia settled beneath the ear tree and closed her eyes. Far below, a dog barked, and the sound rose like a thrown ball and landed softly among the branches. A night breeze unrolled across the hill, full of thyme and sea salt, and the olive leaves rustled with a sound like small hands applauding. "Are you there?" Thalia asked, and the ear tree answered. She did not hear words exactly. She felt them as a low murmur in the wood, as a shiver in the leaf tips, as a thought dropping gently into her mind. "We are here." "Who are you?" she whispered. "We are older than the footsteps that found this hill. We are younger than the starlight that keeps you company. We are the grove. We are the ones who listen back." Thalia's heart lifted in her chest. "May I sit with you?" "Stay," the ear tree breathed. "There is time." The first whisper, root. On the second night, the moon had grown to the shape of a cupped hand, and Thalia returned to the grove with a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth and a small lamp. Not because it was dark, Athena's grove never felt truly dark, but because she liked to set the lamp on a flat stone and watch the tiny flame make a gold cave around itself. Do you ever feel lonely? Do you ever wish to walk away? Beneath her palm, the bark warmed, and through that warmth, the grove offered its first whisper. "We do not walk, little one. We do not run. Our way is to root. In the dry months, when the ground drinks our water, we move downward, thread by patient thread. In winter, when wind pulls at our crowns, we hold with all our hands. We sink into the hill, not to escape the world, but to belong to it. Loneliness is a wind. It passes through. Roots are the hands you have not met yet. Reach downward, and you will find them. Thalia leaned back against the trunk and considered the invisible city beneath her, a weaving of roots, her ear tree holding hands with the neighboring trees and those with their neighbors, a whole subterranean festival of grip and give. She imagined words traveling along those roots, the way gossip travels through a village, softer and truer perhaps than anything said aloud. She broke her bread and laid a piece at the base of the tree. "Thank you," she said. "I will try to root." The night breeze, generous and amused, combed its fingers through the leaves and made them flash silver, green, as if the grove were nodding. The second whisper, "Gift." On the next afternoon, the old caretaker of the grove, a man with hands like driftwood and eyebrows like small hedgehogs, sat on the low wall and watched Thalia climb the path. He always seemed to appear without sound, as if he himself were a tree that sometimes became a man. "You tread as if your feet are thinking," he said. "I'm listening," Thalia replied, and he smiled in the way of people who understand secrets without owning them. "Do you know how this grove began?" he asked. "People say the goddess Athena planted the first tree here," Thalia answered. "They say many things," the caretaker chuckled. "But yes, when the city was new, Poseidon struck his trident upon the rock, and a spring leapt skyward. Salt water. Hard to drink, but beautiful to look at. Athena pressed her spear into the earth, and up grew an olive, a gift that could feed a household and light a lamp and make the human tongue talk softly to bread. The city chose the olive, the gift for all days. And so wisdom grew where the spear touched ground. He looked at the leaves, how the underside flashed in the sun. A gift is a kind of root. It keeps the giver with you. That night, Thalia told the grove what the caretaker had said, because it felt right to bring back stories the way a child brings shells to a listening ocean. "Yes," the grove breathed, and a cool scent rose, like crushed leaves. "We remember a spear and the hand that held it steady. We remember a woman whose eyes were both storm and stillness. Do you know what a gift truly is?" Thalia said, "At my name day, I received a small wooden flute. That was a gift." "That is a present," the grove said, and its tone was soft, approving. "A gift is something you keep giving. Water that shares itself, fire that becomes 1,000 lamps, an olive that becomes oil and bread and light. You, little one, are a gift when you sit still and listen. You make silence into a cup, and the world pours itself in." Thalia's cheeks warmed in the lamplight. I don't know how to give like the olive." "You are learning," the ear tree told her. "Every breath taken slowly is a small lamp. Every kindness is a root." The third whisper, patience. Days tumbled over one another like soft, round stones. Thalia helped her father soak in the nets. She ran errands for the baker. She gathered sprigs of thyme along the path and laid them to dry for her aunt who sold herbs. Each evening she returned to the grove. As the moon swelled and thinned, the grove told its slow stories of winters with no rain, of summers when cicadas sang until the air shimmered, of people who had come and gone like clouds, and of the one thing that remained. "Patience," said the ear tree one night, when the silver boat of the moon had become a platter. "We know the language of patience. We have stood in the cradle of the hill and watched centuries turn their pages. We have learned that not all doors open to a push. Some open to a wait. Not all seeds break at the same hour. Not all friends arrive before the lantern burns low." Thalia thought of the far island where her mother sat at a bedside with a damp cloth and a song. She imagined the almond trees on that island, their buds tight-fisted and green, considering the world. "But waiting is hard," she said. "When I wait, my thoughts run around and trip over themselves. I drop things, I forget what my hands are doing." "Then make your waiting into a weaving," the grove murmured. "Choose one small thing. Stir the soup while counting the breaths. Sweep the step while listening for the first bird. Pluck a dull leaf from our branch, and there, do you feel it? Patience is no longer empty. It is full of you doing a kindness to the world." Thalia reached up and found a leaf that had yellowed. It came away with the smallest sigh. She laid it at the tree's base like a coin before a temple. The fourth whisper: strength. A storm came up from the south on a day that had begun as blue as an eye. The fishermen had just pushed their boats off the sand when the horizon darkened. Waves leaned forward like running men. Thalia's father turned his boat and rowed hard for shore. Rain arrived in big space drops, a warning rain, the villagers called it, and then the sky opened and tipped itself out. Thalia ran to the grove. The path became a ribbon of mud. The thyme bent its backs and shook. In the grove, the trees stood with their roots deep and their crowns tossing like green torches. Thalia pressed herself to the ear tree and wrapped her arms around it. The bark was wet and fragrant. The trunk moved under her cheek, flexing, yielding, holding like a dancer who trusted the music. "Are you afraid?" she called out above the rain. "We bow," the grove roared softly in her bones. "We do not break." Strength is not the clenched fist. It is the open hand that lets the wind pass. It is the trunk that sways and returns. It is the branch that leans and does not snap. It is the root that threads deeper, not the one that pulls away. Be strong as water, little one. Wear the stone by returning again and again. Thalia stood until her hair was a dark river and her dress clung like seaweed. When the storm finally walked north to trouble another village, she wrung rain from her sleeves and laughed because the grove was laughing. Every leaf a drop, every drop a bell. That evening, she and her father ate olives and bread with the last of the summer tomatoes. He touched her wet braid and smiled without asking questions. Some parents understand that children return from certain places with pockets full of unspoken treasures, and it is enough to watch them shine. The fifth whisper: share. Summer loosened. The sky softened from bright cloth to fine wool. On the hill, the olives deepened from green to dusk black. The caretaker set out shallow baskets and nets with a glint in his eye and whistled a tune that sounded like wind stitched to sunlight. He said, "Harvest soon? Will you help?" Thalia nodded so hard that her braids hopped. She wanted to be a hand in whatever the grove had to say next. On the first day of harvest, the village climbed the hill with jars and songs. They spread the nets beneath the trees and with sticks wrapped in cloth, beat the branches until olives dropped like small planets falling into new orbits. Thalia was gentle. She touched each branch with thanks and balanced on bare feet to keep the fruit from bruising. Her hands grew purpled, her nails wore a small moon of dust. At noon they ate. The caretaker poured oil into shallow dishes and sprinkled it with crushed thyme and salt. Thalia's father broke bread and they dipped and shared, each mouthful tasting of sun kept in the fruit's dark flesh, of rain saved, of patient light. Thalia thought of the trees mean by a gift, not the keeping, but the sharing. The grove murmured its approval as if 100 grandmothers had nodded at once. "Share your light and your shade," the ear tree told her. "If you have one blanket, make a lap. If you have one lantern, set it by the path." That afternoon, as the press began its work, stone against stone, steady and resigned, Thalia's attention snagged at a small boy at the edge of the nets. He had a ragged shirt and a cautious way of standing, as if he were ready to run. His eyes were the pale yellow-brown of unripe figs. Thalia walked over with both palms open, her own pockets empty, to show she had nothing to take. "Hello? Would you like to help me gather the olives that roll away?" He looked at her as if she had asked him to name the stars. Then he nodded. "I'm Thalia," she said. "I'm Andros," he replied. "My mother makes brooms. Sometimes we need oil for the lamps, and it is hard." Thalia thought of the dish of golden oil and the dipping bread. She thought of the grove's whisper of share. "Then come," she said, "and we will make the nets into our sea. We will fish for the rolling ones together." They worked side by side until their hands smelled like thunder and green. When the day went violet, the caretaker pressed the cork bottle of fresh oil into Andros's hands. "For your mother," he said simply. Andros looked surprised and then fierce, as if he were deciding what to do with the sudden heaviness of abundance. "Thank you," he said to the caretaker, and then awkwardly, shyly, to Thalia. He lifted the bottle a little, as if it were a lamp that might show him his way home. The owl and the dream. That night, Thalia could not fall asleep. Her arms hummed from beating branches. Her nose held a ghost of the day's green bruise. She rose and went to the grove under a moon that had thinned again to a white almond. The grove was awake. An owl perched on the ear tree, its eyes 2 coins of night. It turned its head and regarded Thalia with the frank curiosity of a teacher who has set a riddle and waits to see who will smile first. "Are you?" Thalia began and then felt foolish because to name the goddess was to pretend to know her face. The owl clicked its beak the way the goddess might do if the goddess were a bird. "Wisdom comes in many feathers," the grove breathed. "I have listened and I have learned to root, to give, to be patient, to be strong, and to share. But I am still lonely sometimes." The owl lifted one foot, then set it down. Loneliness is the ache where friendship will grow. It is the empty cup that invites pouring. It is the night sky waiting for a star. The owl leapt and became a shadow among shadows. Thalia lay on the ground, her cheek against the ear tree's roots. Sleep came like a shawl, gentle and smelling of thyme. In her dream, the grove gathered closer, the trunks bending like women around a cradle. Leaves brushed her hair. The goddess, who sometimes was an owl, and sometimes the moon, and sometimes a woman whose eyes were storms, learning to be still, touched Thalia's forehead.
"What you hear, keep," the dream voice said. "What you learn, share. Be a root and a branch. Be a lantern and a shade. When you are lonely, plant a kindness and wait." When Thalia woke, the stars were paling, and the first bird had cleared its throat. She felt rested in a way that did not disappear when she stood. The grove had become a crace inside her as well as around her. The Festival of Lamps. The day came for the village to celebrate the new oil. They called it the Festival of Lamps. At twilight, the caretaker and Thalia and Andros and the baker and the broom maker and all the fishermen and aunties and grandfathers climbed the hill with little clay lamps cupped in their hands. Each lamp wore a small saffron flame. The grove looked like a moving constellation, Earth's stars answering the skies. The caretaker stood near the ear tree and cleared his throat. "We give thanks," he said, "for the gifts that keep giving, for patience that tastes of bread, for strength that sways, for roots that hold neighbors, for light that walks home with us in the dark." He nodded to Thalia, who had brought her wooden flute. Her father had polished it with a wool cloth until it shone like a tiny moon. Thalia lifted it to her lips and played a slow tune. It was a tune she had learned from the leaves, because sometimes sound is only breath that forgot its body for a moment and wandered into the world. As she played, she saw Andros look up at the owl's branch with a small, startled joy. She felt her father's pride like a warm shawl over her shoulders. She noticed the caretaker's eyes close the way people's eyes close when they are at home. When the tune finished, the caretaker lit a larger lamp from the small ones and set it at the ear tree's base. The flame made the bark seem to move, made the old scars look like the folds of a smiling face. "Would you like to say something?" he asked Thalia, because the grove had a way of choosing people to speak for it. Thalia swallowed. Her heart leapt against her ribs. She thought of the first night, the small voice, like a breath in the dark, the feeling of being found by something that belonged to her without belonging to her alone. "I have listened," she said. "The trees say root, gift, patience, strength, share." She lifted the larger lamp in both hands and turned in a slow circle so the whole village could see the flame. "She say, you are not alone, not when you are quiet, not when you are kind, not
when you are waiting, not when the wind pushes hard. The grove holds us all, the living and the gone, the new and the old. If we listen, we can hear the world whisper back. The wind stirred, 100 small flames bowed and did not go out. From somewhere beyond sight, a wave struck the shore and folded itself neatly like a sheet snapped over a bed. The owl called once, and the sound seemed to sit on each shoulder and make itself comfortable. Thalia set the lamp back by the ear tree. In its glow, she saw the shadow of a taller shape beside her. Not a shadow, but a presence. The air grew lucid. A woman made of thinking light stood where the darker night had been. The villagers inhaled together. Even the caretaker's eyebrows rose like astonished birds. The woman looked at Thalia with eyes that were both storm and stillness, both question and answer. She inclined her head, not like a queen before a subject, but like a teacher before a student who had said something true. "Thank you," Thalia whispered, though she could not have said whether she spoke to the goddess, the grove, or the night that had gathered to listen. The woman, or the thought of her, breathed, and the small flames brightened. Then she was gone. Or perhaps she had not been there at all, except in the way that a moment of clarity is there, real and vanishing, permanent and brief. The lamps burned low. People laughed softly and ate bread dipped in the first oil of the harvest. Andros's mother, the broom maker, pressed Thalia's hands and left a small wreath of twigs and ribbon on her head. "For listening," she said. "The world loves a listener." The long, quiet season. The almond trees bloomed at last, and on a day when the sea looked like a plate blown from blue glass, Thalia's mother returned by boat, her dress full of salt and sky. They embraced in the shallows, sea water around their knees, laughter and wet faces and hands touching the truth to make sure it was true. That night, Thalia told her mother everything, about the 5 whispers, about the owl's eyes, about the way the bark felt warm when the grove was thinking. Her mother listened the way Thalia listened to the trees. "When I was a girl," she said, "I thought the grove spoke only in riddles meant for grown minds. Now, I see it speaks in lullabies for brave hearts." Winter came, soft-footed, smelling of smoke. The hills wore shawls of mist. The grove grew quiet, but not silent. Branches stilled, roots busy. Thalia visited less often because the evenings were cold and her mother told long stories by the lamp. But on certain nights, the pull of the hill was gentle and sure as the moon's tug on the tide, and she climbed to the ear tree with a blanket and sat watching her breath make small, surprised clouds. "We are here," the grove always said. "We are thinking slow, we are dreaming deep, but we are here." Sometimes Andros joined her, carrying 2 cups and a flask of something hot that smelled of lemon and honey. They traded silences the way other children trade sweets. Once, as they sat with their backs to the same tree, Andros said, "When I listen very hard, I feel as if my chest
has a door, and the door opens and the air walks through. That is what the grove does. It opens the doors we didn't know were there. Andros looked at the stars through the dark lace of the branches. Do you think the goddess listens to us? I think listening is the goddess's favorite craft. I think she taught the trees. They let the thoughts settle around them like a second blanket.
Spring again and always. When spring loosened winter's knot and the first light stepped longer into the afternoon, the grove woke fully. Bees stitched their golden sentences from blossom to blossom. The caretaker hummed as he mended the low wall where goats had made a gate. Thalia felt taller, as if the waiting had stretched her the way rain stretches a river. She and Andros ran errands together now and walked home the long way, talking about the shapes of clouds and the strange talent of stones to be warm on one side and cool on the other. On a day of wind-tossed sunlight, Thalia came to the grove with the small sachet that her mother had sewn. Inside were 3 olive pits from last season's harvest and a pinch of earth from the hill. She knelt beside the ear tree. I have brought a gift, she said, because gifts, like stories, sometimes want to be announced. We are listening, the grove said. With careful fingers, Thalia planted the pits in a circle near the ear tree's roots. She thought of the first whisper, root, and imagined tiny threads reaching out in 3 directions like explorers with lanterns. She pressed the earth down with her palms and then brushed off the soil and kissed her hands, not because she had to, but because it felt right. These are for the years I cannot see yet, she murmured. For a child who will sit here when I am grown. The wind wore a smile. The leaves made their silver dance. Behind Thalia, footsteps approached. I brought this, said Andros. He held up a small wooden bird he had carved. The owl's round head, the question of its beak. It was not perfect. One wing was shorter than the other. The threads of the wood showed where the knife had argued and then agreed. But when Thalia cupped it in her hands, she felt the exact weight of care. We should hang it here, she said. And together they bound it to the ear tree with a strip of cloth. The wooden owl moved with the wind and made a soft tapping, like a teacher's ring on a desk, calling a classroom to attention. Root, breathed the grove. Gift, patience, strength, share. The words, or not words, but something like them, moved through Thalia and out again the way breath moves, the way music moves when the breath decides to sing. Thalia stood, Andros stood, the grove stood and sat and lay down and rose, because when a living thing is truly alive, it is always doing all the verbs at once. Shall we go? Andros asked. Let's stay a little longer, Thalia said, and the grove agreed because it loved to hear its own quiet heart beating in company. They stayed until the swallows traced their evening letters across the sky, and the first star unpinned itself from the horizon. Thalia thought of the long threads of roots that stitched the hill together. She thought of the way the village lamps would soon bloom one by one like ground flowers. She thought of her mother turning the bread, and of her father laying out his nets beside the door, and of the caretaker whistling to himself, and of all the small, brave ways people kept each other company in a vast, whispering world. When she finally stood to go, Thalia pressed her palm to the ear tree and felt that slow, steady pulse that was not hers alone. "Good night," she said. "Good night," answered the grove, the owl, the wind, the leaves, the goddess refracted into 1,000 small kindnesses. "We are here." And the hill, and the village, and the sea, and the sky agreed.